Welcome to the Source of Commercial Real Estate, where we discuss all things non-residential commercial real estate, including finding and funding deals, seeking opportunities, and using commercial real estate to live the life that you want. I am your host, Jonathan Hayek, and today I'm talking with Ashley Wilson with Bar Down Investments. We are venturing into the residential real estate space today, but that's okay. We'll forgive you for that, Ashley. Ashley, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Sincerely, looking forward to this conversation and looking to get some of your expertise here today. Ashley, why don't we start out with you telling us about your background, how you got started in real estate, and what your portfolio looks like today?
I started in real estate in 2009, and I started because I was looking for an alternative way to diversify my retirement strategy. I was working in clinical pharmaceuticals, and I did R&D for three major pharmaceutical companies, which essentially means that I was running clinical trials before regulatory approval globally, and I had a team, a global team that we oversaw pediatric trials, also seasonal and pandemic flu trials. We did a whole host of different vaccines was our primary indication that I focused on in the last tenure of my, big corporate type big corporate America job that I had prior to real estate. But I started in 2009. I started with doing a house hack and short-term rentals, and that quickly turned into long-term rentals. And then I started a high-end flipping business with my father. He's a general contractor, and he's had his own construction company for over 40 years. That business originated in 2014. And we did full gut rehabs, primarily homes from 1890 to 1960. And higher end homes. So that was our focus. And then I started in commercial real estate in 2018 with 124 unit property. And then I started my own company, Bar Down Investments, in 2018, that same year as well. Originally, I thought I would consult with other groups, but I found it to be more advantageous for me to start my own company doing everything soup to nuts. So I learned every aspect of finding and funding and running multifamily properties. So today, that is what I'm doing. I also have a coaching program with my partner, Jay Scott, called Apartment Addicts. And then I'm also a huge advocate for women coming into real estate and having financial freedom. So I speak a lot about that and wrote a book as well with 19 other female real estate investors titled The Only Woman in the Room. And I'm in the process of writing my second book, which is positioned currently as a textbook for universities. So that's what I'm doing today with respect to my portfolio. We have several properties in Houston and Kansas City. And yeah, that's what we're doing.
I want to start by talking about your flipping and the high-end flipping. That's a little bit of my background as well. I'm sure not to the level that you were doing, but I did a couple of those high-end, kind of more high-margin flips. And when you get those great deals, it can be pretty sweet. And an argument could be made, like, why not double down on that, on the high-end flipping? Rather than pivot to CRE. So what was that transition like? Why shift away from that high-end flipping?
There are a few reasons. From a very practical standpoint, with respect to assessing one's tax situation, my personal tax situation was just getting hit after hit. And one day I looked at what I was paying for taxes, and it was six figures. And I realized that essentially I did one house for free. That's how I looked at it. I did one house for the government, meaning that that entire project, all of those profits went into the hands of Uncle Sam as opposed to my pocket. And that was very eye-opening for me to position that profit that way. That was one major reason. Another reason is you're going to work hard no matter what you do. Why not add a zero onto the profit, or two zeros or three zeros? And I feel like multifamily has that capability, especially when you're doing larger multifamily properties. I personally am a glutton for punishment. I love being intellectually stimulated. And frankly, and I know this sounds terrible to say to people who are in flipping, I find flipping to be very boring. It's very rinse and repeat for me. And it doesn't challenge challenge me enough, or stimulate my mind enough. I like higher complexity type of challenges. I think that commercial real estate in general is very behind, especially when it comes to technological integration. And I think there's a lot of room left on the runway to integrate technology into every single aspect of the business and commercial. So I like the fast pace in which commercial is starting to catch up with the times and change the way we do business today, even with AI integration, from not only from sourcing deals, raising capital, but even management of the properties, and how AI looks to be able to solve a lot of issues that we face today with running these properties. So personally, I love multifamily because it has a lot of challenges that come along with it when you're managing the actual assets itself. So I don't really look at um, multifamily as real estate. I actually look at it as I'm buying a business and real estate's attached to that. And I think I do well at finding ways to optimize a business. That's why I think I was really good at flipping houses right away, because I figured out how to make it a business, but it's still more so, it's really heavily tied to real estate still. It transacts off of real estate value instead of your operational value. Your operational value just helps your margins a little bit, but in commercial, it's really based on how well you can run a business. So I think I thrive better when I'm optimizing business operations.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. And I can totally relate to the flipping and tax conundrum, especially early on. I don't know if you had the experience of having a couple really great paydays, and you think, you get to closing and you think you made all this money. And then, whatever, next year or something, you do your taxes and you find that you actually did not make all that money. So definitely a good reason to get into the bigger commercial real estate, much more tax friendly. I want to talk to you about the time frame for starting to get into real estate really in 2009, and then getting into the commercial world in 2018. So there's a 10-year window there where you were doing short-term rentals, long-term rentals, some flipping, before you finally got into the bigger commercial stuff. Looking back on uh, that 10-year time period, how do you view that time period? Do you view that as you learned the necessary skills to get to where you are today? Or do you view it almost as like wasted time? Like, wow, that's 10 years that I could have been doing these bigger deals. How do you view that time period?
So part of my story is also knowing that my husband was a professional athlete. And because he was a professional athlete, that put us in a position where I didn't have the ability to get into commercial real estate until 2018. I mean, I guess one could argue you can do anything remotely now, but back then it was very difficult to build relationships virtually. And especially within commercial real estate. And commercial real estate, as we all know, is a relationship based business. So at the tail end of my husband's career as a professional athlete, we moved over to Europe and Russia and lived there for 4 years. So my entire business of flipping houses was primarily based at managing from afar, which was easier for me to do because I had my father as boots on the ground. Now, one could also argue I could have partnered with someone in the US and built a commercial real estate business, which I probably could have done. And looking back, that is an opportunity, a lost opportunity. I don't look at anything in terms of regret. I think that if, hindsight's 2020, if I had done commercial real estate earlier, I'd obviously be in a much different position than I am today, but maybe I would have taken for granted, like a lot of people have done, and we've seen recently, that cap rates don't always go down. And I think that being coming into it at the time period that I did, and coming into it in a bad partnership deal, and all of these challenges I faced very early on, has built my business to as strong as it is today. I'm very proud of the business that we have today. I'm not a unit count person. That doesn't matter. That literally does not matter. Our goals as a company are not built off of unit count. It's actually built off of profits returned to our investors. So I can tell you that this year our goal is to return 2.7 million to our investors. That is not a number out of the sky. That's a number that is directly related to the promise that we made to investors, that these are the returns that we're going to deliver to you. So in terms of how we've grown to that point, I think it's a matter of being patient. We're in it for the long run. Especially commercial real estate is not an overnight profit like a flipping business is. So yes, there was a lot of missed opportunities, especially to get on the upswing of multifamily. But I also think today, more than ever, that we are positioned as one of the best operators in the entire country. And that's why our properties are doing as well as they are. When, people are having all these discussions, and not even discussions, but they're already on maybe their first or second capital call, and we're not even having discussions on capital calls. That to me is proof in the pudding that we did things the right way. So yes, I can look back and say, oh, I wish I had bought more. I wish I had been commercial real estate. But I also am extremely proud of the team that we have today. I'm very proud of the properties we bought, under what conditions we bought, the lessons we've learned along the way, and the hard work we've put in place to do things the right way from the beginning, so that now when things get tough, and I said this, back in 2018, operations are important, but in tough times, they're the most important aspect of the business. And we did all the hard work starting in 2018. So now we're not panicking like all these other operators are. And I think that's just a testament to being patient and not looking at other people and using them as the measuring stick for what we want to achieve.
There's so many powerful nuggets of wisdom in what you said there. I just want to reiterate kind of my admiration for your, some of your most important metrics are the amount of money that you return to investors. It's not assets under management, it's not unit count, but it's how well you can serve the people that are helping you reach your goals. And so I think that's really powerful. There's no doubt that we learn so much from our previous experiences. So those 10 years that you were doing flipping and short-term rentals and long-term rentals, you were learning important lessons that no doubt are serving you right now. And I think some of those lessons, from what I know of you, have been your expertise in construction and in operations. And you touched on it before, that having really solid operations is what gets people through hard times like right now. And so I want to go into your expertise in construction and operations. I heard you tell a story about, one of your first flips taking 9 months. And then towards the tail end of your flipping journey, it was down to 9 weeks. And I know you're not flipping now, but I have no doubt that some of those lessons learned in flipping are now transferred over into your construction and operations as you're turning apartment communities over. So can you tell me some of the lessons learned from those flips that would take 9 months to the tail end where you really got it nailed down? And I'm sure now you've got it highly systematized. And so what are some of those things that took so long, and how did you get it narrowed down to a much shorter time frame?
Yeah, so just a little correction. The first flip we did took
Mm-hmm.
a little over 9 months. But a year to date from that flip, it took us the exact same project. In fact, it was a larger scope, took us 9 weeks. So it wasn't even at the tail end of flipping, it was right away. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm a huge believer in in all of the different milestones that you achieve, you have to have debriefs. And then when you have the debriefs, you immediately write down all of the challenges that you had along the way and the lessons learned that would have, if you knew it at the time, would have benefited you to fast track or make a process run more efficiently. So, for example, when we get a property under contract, let's say, right, and we get the property under contract and we go through DD and we go through close, immediately after close, we have a debrief of that entire process every single time to say what could have made this process run better. There is never a situation that you will ever have that someone's going to say, everything ran perfectly. Because if everything ran perfectly, you probably could have closed on that property the day after you put it under contract. But you still had to run through DD. How do you streamline DD? How do you line up your financing faster? How do you line up your equity faster? All of these things, getting the property sooner from the date in which you have your original assumptions makes you puts you, in a better position to manage the property. Because once you put a property under contract, the average time from contract to close is 60 to 75 days nationwide. So if you're able to close that gap, you are going to have a better time operating it from day one because you're closer to your original assumptions. You don't know what the original owner is going to do over those 60 to 75 days. So how do you shorten up that timeline? How do you make your DD run smoother? How do you raise capital or have your capital lined up ready to be deployed both on debt and equity? We did the same thing with flipping. So every single house, when we would complete a project, we would say, how do we make this process run faster? So on the first house, why did it take 9 months? My dad's a general contractor, and my dad has done everything, every aspect of renovating a house, building a house, working on commercial. He's literally done it all. But he's never done it where the time component has been a major impact on his business sustainability. But in flipping, it is a huge factor. So in terms of learning the orders of operation, that's something I didn't fully understand. Going through that first house together, I had eyes open, ears listening to every single thing he was telling me, and I documented everything to find out where we could have different trades run in parallel and where we couldn't have different trades running in parallel. So I learned the order of operation, and then after the conclusion of that first property, my dad was ecstatic. We made, I think it was like a little over 60,000. We split 50-50. My dad's ecstatic because at the time there was a statistic that only 90% of house flippers, 90% of house flippers didn't make a profit. And of those, of the 10% that actually did make a profit, 95% of them only made $5,000. So we were in this, basically one percenters club of first time house flippers. And my dad was ecstatic because we made a 5-figure profit. And I turned to my dad because even though the renovation took 9 months from C to C, or close to close, as I call it, we only made $30,000 each. So I said to my dad, because at the time we were only doing one house at a time, I said, Dad, can you survive off of $30,000 a year? And he said, no. And I said, neither can I. So to me, this is a failure. Like, how do we tighten up our operations so we can get this done faster, we can scale the business? And he was pissed at me. I still remember this. Like, he was so mad at me because he was so happy about how well we did, but I didn't see it the same way. So we had a debrief meeting and we literally went through the entire process on how we could have done things better. One thing is that, and this is a lesson carried over into commercial, is that the work doesn't start the day you get the keys in your hand. The work starts when you have a signed contract in hand. That's the difference. So getting your contractors in place beforehand on single family, a lot of people don't do that. They don't line up their contractors, and it's a shorter day close, so you can line up your contractors. A lot of townships and municipalities actually allow you to get your permits in advance as long as you have a copy of a signed contract. So that's something you can do in advance. Another thing that you can do in advance is come up with your marketing plan and strategy, your materials. So for example, last year we bought a property and there was a shortage of roofing materials at the time. This is during COVID, materials supply shortages going on. And I have a really good relationship with our contractors, and they knew, being transparent about your business plan is huge. You have to have everyone on the same page. So having your contractors know this is the level of renovation that we're going to do, and this is, the timeline we want to do it in, they gave me the heads up. You might want to order your materials in advance, because otherwise, first of all, there's going to be a price hike. And number two is you're probably not going to get them until, end of summer. And we were closing on the property February 1st. The roof is the most important thing, because if you have leaks going on, you really can't do anything else, because otherwise you're constantly redoing things. So the roof is, in my opinion, the most important thing you have to tackle first, right? So that was a good heads up for us to, okay, let's place a tentative order with this supplier, as long as, the property closes and everything's on, going well. And this is about having a good relationship with the provider as well. And they know they're going to sell the materials. I mean, there was such a shortage, right? But having it designated for us, these are all things that lessons learned from single family that carry over. Another lesson that I learned that I cannot believe that people don't do, it's so common sense to me, is a final walkthrough. So on single family, you have a closing window on, I think nationwide it's 45 days. In our area, it's 30 days, but still 45 days is pretty short compared to commercial real estate. And yet so many things can happen from the day you put a residential property under contract to close. But in commercial real estate, it's not common to do a final walkthrough, yet the average close period can be 75, 90, 120 days even, right? So many things can change during that period of time. And you want to know what you're buying, right? You probably would not buy a Ferrari, a couple $100,000 Ferrari, if it sat in a parking lot for 75 days before you picked it up, right? You wouldn't just assume everything was okay. But a Ferrari is a couple $100,000, right? And you're buying 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million property. Don't you think you should take a look at it one more time before you sign on the paper? So to me, those are things that I think people kind of just forget that they're able to do, especially in commercial real estate, where it's like the wild, wild west. You can do anything, really. You can put anything as a condition in the contract.
Yeah, a couple really, I think, insightful things there. I think I imagine if you can reduce the amount of time from contract to close, it makes you look more credible, and it improves your reputation. Because if you have the ability to say, when you're putting an offer in, hey, these other guys, they're going to be 90 to 120 days, whereas Bar Down, we've got our operation so nailed down, it's going to be 45 days or 60 days or whatever it is, and here are the last 3 or 4 or 5 properties that we've done, and we can close faster than the other guys. So do you think that's a competitive advantage for you all?
I think it's a competitive advantage. I think more so a surety to close is a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I also think when you have construction knowledge, and brokers know that about me, they know she's not going to retrade. She's The only time we've ever even asked for a retrade was due to fraud. So, there are things on the construction side. I think the only thing I would ever retrade on is something that is so, like, there would be no way of me knowing. And it was such an extravagant expense. But let's say, for example, that it's a 1980s property. Most likely they're going to have used, like, I'm blanking on the word here right now, but cast iron piping, right? So if I thought, oh, they're using PVC, and then I come in and it's cast iron, like, that shouldn't surprise me, right? Because that was the material of choice typically during the late 1970s, early 1980s. Some properties actually switched over to PVC prior to them, but still a lot of properties were using cast iron. So um, in terms of knowing like the materials used during certain periods in certain areas, that's something you should be knowledgeable about. And I don't think a lot of buyers are, but brokers know that I'm knowledgeable about these things, and then I assume these things and I put them in on our underwriting. So I don't think, unless, for example, all of them are collapsed underneath when we do a sewer scope, um, and that's something I want to be able to see, unless I did a full DD, then but there are also signs of that too, like the water being turned off and on, and the which could be tied to the heating supply or the water supply. Also backups. If you read comments, there it leaves clues. Like just read the reviews. So there are things that might require a retrade, but I think the competitive advantage that I have is, or we have as a company, is that we are so knowledgeable about construction. So we're not going to nickel and dime someone over things that should be obvious to an educated buyer. I think timelines to close, I know, is a competitive advantage. There's a buyer that I know in the Houston market that closes in 2 weeks, all cash, and then figures out the financing later, and then rinses and repeats. So they keep recycling this cash that they have to buy these properties in 2 weeks, and then figures out the refinancing later and refinances his investors out, to just keep using that pot of money. And I know he gets a lot of properties at a steep discount just because people want properties sold quickly and they don't have to go through the huge process. But everyone, I think, has a different advantage. It's just kind of how you play on your strengths.
Let's talk about a little more about your knowledge in construction. So, this is such a pain point for so many operators, whether it's residential or non-residential or flipping. Finding good quality contractors that will do good work at a reasonable price, in a reasonable amount of time. Those are really tough people to find, contractors that will meet those requirements. So, can you talk to me about any suggestions that you have for aligning interests with your contractor so that things are done on time and on budget?
When I first started, my dad said to me, do you know the song "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Rolling Stones? Well, he said there are three things about contractors: there is price, quality, and time. You can get two out of the three. Pick wisely. And I always remember that. And how I use that to my advantage is I do it by project. So there are certain things that I want of high quality, which means that I'm probably going to have to pay a high expense. If I want it done in a shorter period of time, I'm going to have to pay even higher expense. If there's things that I need that are time sensitive, and I don't care so much about the quality, I probably still have to pay a little bit of a surcharge on the time. If I don't need, the time doesn't matter that much, maybe I compromise on the time. Maybe I even compromise on the quality, but the pricing is where I get the benefit. So, in terms of knowing those three things, you kind of just have to play to that and know for each project what are the most important things. And every single project has a ranking. You should be able to rank every single project 1, 2, 3 out of those three things. What's the most important and what you're going to have to give up on. So that's first and foremost. Number two is when you're finding good contractors, it really only starts by finding one. All you have to do is find one, because most of the time, not most of the time, all of the time, absolute truth is that good people work with good people. And the reason why good people work with good people is the same reason why millionaires hang out with millionaires and billionaires hang out with billionaires. It's because people like hanging out and associating themselves with people that they have common interest with. When you are looking for someone who is a good framer, all you have to do is find someone who is good at drywall. Because if someone is really good at framing, squares the walls off correctly, does it to the specs, it makes the drywallers job easier. And it really just takes with finding one person, and you can work backwards or forwards from there. So typically, when I go to a new market, I just try to find one source, and then I use that source to give me all of their recommendations on either ends of the spectrum to build out a whole team A, team B. And I don't mean it that they're lesser quality. I just mean that multiple teams, that you have a good group of contractors that you can rely on. I also think that a lot of people aren't very transparent with their business plan. I see this on the property management side, and I also see it on the contracting side. And they don't allow the contractor to give their opinion. The only time I don't see this is when it comes to a pool, and it's because most people aren't knowledgeable about pools. Well, if you own a pool, you'll this story will resonate with you, is that when you have someone come out to look at your pool, you say, "I'm having issues with this." And that person will say, "Well, I think we should fix this issue by solving it with Y." Then you have someone else come out for the pool. "I'm having an issue with X, this situation," and they'll say, "I think we should solve it with X." And then you have someone else come out and they say, "I think we should solve it with Z." No three pool, people will come out and give you the same solution. And the reason they won't give you the same solution is because you're not telling them the solution you want. When we talk about any other aspect of construction, we tell the solution that we want as opposed to the problem that we are experiencing. And I think if you flip the script and you say, "I'm having the patios are an issue at this property. I only plan to hold the property 3 to 5 years. I don't have a large budget for this job, but I need to secure them. They need to be to code. They need to be safe, so there's no safety and liability risk. And I need them to be aesthetically pleasing. What are my options?" Then you have people come out, give different opinions on how to rectify the solution. You get 3 contractors out, you figure out the solution you want, then you go back to all 3 contractors and say, instead of ripping down the patios and rebuilding the patios, I have decided that we're going to sister board the sides in to make them more secure. We're going to attach another post to shore up the base of the patio, and we're going to put cedar plank on the sides. And that's the solution I want. Can you please bid that out? Well, there are extra steps involved in that process, but in the long run, it's a better way to solve the issue. It's probably more cost efficient, and it's a better way for you to get an apples to apples comparison on the correct solution, as opposed to just having the first contractor come out, tell you the solution, then the next 2 contractors come out and have them bid on that solution, because that assumes that that solution was the correct solution in the first place when it may not have been the correct solution. So this way, it allows you to have a creative pool of solutions in which you can pick the best one that fits your business plan, and then get an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it just shows the value of having someone on your team. If it's not you, having someone on your team, someone you can consult with that is knowledgeable about the construction process. I loved what you said about telling a contractor about what solution you want, not the problem. Because anyone that's worked with contractors knows that contractors may, you get 5 different contractors to look at a problem, and they're going to come up with 5 different answers, just like what you mentioned. And it doesn't necessarily mean that any of the contractors have bad intentions or, they're wrong. There are oftentimes just different ways to solve problems depending on exactly what you said, your budget, your time frame, and the quality that you want. Ashley, I want to move on to something you touched on earlier, is your thirst for kind of like your intellectual thirst. So you've been published on the Bigger Pockets website. You're a published author. You're writing a textbook. You had an article published on the American Apartment Owners Association. Can you talk to me about how spending time doing the intellectual stuff and the writing, how does that help your business plan? How does that help bar down investments, continue to buy and manage apartment communities? How do those two things connect?
Um, that's a great question. um, I mean, I guess if you were asking our marketing director, they would say it helps with marketing for us, but that's not really why I do it. I actually thoroughly enjoy writing. I find it very therapeutic, and I also find it, to what you originally said, more intellectually stimulating, because when I start to write, I start to realize that there are questions that I haven't asked. And it's almost like when you teach someone. When you teach, you become the teacher. I mean, excuse me, the student, and the student becomes the teacher. And what's so interesting about that dynamic is I find that so challenging sometimes, because some of the most obvious questions appear that I haven't really processed an answer for. And I find that parallel when I write. So the book that I'm writing currently originated out of a LinkedIn post. So I write on LinkedIn. I try to write on LinkedIn once a week. I have at least probably 75 ideas that I have yet to write on LinkedIn. Every single time I have an idea, I put it on this sheet so I know to go back to, when I'm going to write my article for LinkedIn that week, I reference this sheet, and I went to write on this one subject matter, and I started brainstorming, and I got to a point where like it was becoming overwhelming. So then I started talking to my husband about it, and we spent 2 hours talking about this and building out kind of a skeleton for what I was going to write. And then I was like, this is not a LinkedIn post, this is a book. And he was like, yeah, it's 100% a book. And next thing I know, I'm over 150 pages in writing this book, at a little over 50% of the way done the book. And yet it was all supposed to be a LinkedIn post. So I think it's because there are things that I don't, it's just like when I got into multifamily, I didn't even know the things I didn't know. And that's what I love about writing. And I hope that the things that I'm writing are helping other people kind of process real estate investing, multifamily, financial freedom, and life. And I hope that it's providing insight to help people along their journey as well, to make educated decisions, because I don't think a lot of people are writing on a lot of the subject matter. So I think it's an opportunity for me to voice my thoughts on the subject matter, and then at least provide a starting point for people to jump in and then add their comments and their thoughts on the subject matter as well, so we can start to get dialogue going. Because flipping, everyone will tell you what they're doing and give away the secret sauce. But in multifamily, everyone's so guarded. First of all, it's the most egotistical industry I think I've ever seen in my life. It's annoyingly egotistical. But number two, everyone is so guarded that you're just going to learn their process. And I talk about it. I mean, I just talked about how we price out different projects on rehab. We are a little less guarded, and hopefully that'll create better ways in which people can run their business.
Yeah, I think, your intellectual curiosity, your thoughtfulness, whether it's on LinkedIn or in books, there's definitely a need for it. There is plenty of people talking about their 2x returns and how great of a deal they got, and what sports car they just bought with the deal they just sold. We have enough of that. What we don't have enough of is people being thoughtful about what they're doing, why they're doing it, sharing value with other people. Because I mean, if there's one lesson the internet has taught us and is teaching us, it's that knowledge is not necessarily the issue for people accomplishing their goals and tackling problems. We have all of the knowledge that we can possibly have, and yet there's still people that are like, "Well, how do I quit my W-2 job and get involved in real estate?" It's like the information is out there. It's a it's a matter of taking action and doing the things, and networking and partnering with the people, and being thoughtful about things. And so speaking of your writing and you being thoughtful, one of the books you wrote is called The Only Woman in the Room. And this is about women in commercial real estate. And I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your experience being a female in commercial real estate. I've heard you talk on another podcast about how you use being a female in commercial real estate to your advantage. So, can you talk a little bit about your experience being a woman in commercial real estate?
I think being a woman in commercial real estate is amazing because there are not many women in real estate, in commercial real estate. So it's very easy to be memorable. It's very easy to stand out because I'm not wearing a blue or black suit with brown or black shoes at these events. I look different. I think differently. I talk differently, and that's memorable. And we should lean into that. We should lean into the fact that we, instead of playing victim, we should lean into the fact that we are different, and um, play off of the fact that we're women and we have different interests in how we do our business and why we're doing our business, to what you were just talking about earlier. So, in terms of, uh, there was one broker who, when we brought our team down, and I actually was with mainly men that came down to Houston this one time, and the broker said to my partners, "Do you know why I remember Ashley? Because she's the only woman who, first of all, is typically reaching out to us, wanting properties, but number two, is more knowledgeable than almost every other person we work with in terms of construction and just multifamily knowledge in general." And I think that, um, I never look at being a woman as a disadvantage at all. I actually am very proud to be having to be a role model to other women in this industry, to know that it's possible as a woman to be not only in this industry, but successful in this industry. I'm very proud to be a role model to my daughters. They don't see um, me as the only woman in these pictures of seas of all men. They don't even recognize that, which I think is really cool. And them seeing that a woman can do anything. It's, we're not limited by our gender. So I don't know. I actually think it's great, but I also enjoy seeing more women at these events. So I just went to an event last week, Limitless, which, if people are not aware of this event, I highly recommend. It's put on by Ken McElroy and Tarl Yarber, and it is one of the best conferences that I've attended. And I looked in the audience now, like, I'm more cognizant of the fact. When I first started on real estate, because I went to an all boys high school, and I played, a solo sport growing up. My brother was on a team sport. I was constantly around a lot of boys versus girls. So it never really stood out to me until the whole book. And you can read the intro in the book to kind of hear that whole story. But the point is that I never really recognized it, but now I'm very cognizant of it. So anytime I go to an event, I'm very intentional about kind of guesstimating the breakdown between women and men. And when I first started going to events, I would say less than 5% of the people in the audience were women, mainly men. I've been to multiple events, by the way, where I was literally the only woman. But, at Limitless, I would easily say there was probably 30% of the people in attendance that were women, maybe even more than that. That's phenomenal. That's so much progress in such a short period of time. And if anything, we have more runway to go than men do, right? Men dominated this space, but women now are starting to come into this space in droves, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see that. So I'm just really proud of the women who are now stepping up and being keynotes and being on the main stage and not just limited to panels. That's another thing that very, very common that happens at these events. So it's awesome to see women kind of take a main stage presence at these events and share their experiences. And it's not even just like from a women's perspective, but just from an experience perspective. They have just as strong of a right to be there as anyone else. So it's pretty cool to see.
Thanks for sharing your reflections and your inspiration on that. I have two young daughters, and so it's something that I think a lot about my role in it, and what kind of opportunities I'm giving them, and what kind of world they're going into, when they're in their 20s and 30s, and trying to be, a curious person and a high achiever and an intellectual. So thank you for providing that inspiration. I want to talk a little bit about Bar Down Investments, and I know you all have apartment addicts, and you all have a summit coming up. So tell me about apartment addicts, and tell me about the summit that's coming up in the fall.
So, Apartment Addicts was created by my partner, Jay Scott, and myself. When I started in commercial real estate, I really didn't have anywhere to turn in terms of getting soup to nuts information. There were a lot of programs out there teaching you how to find properties and how to raise capital, but no one taught you actually how to operate properties. So, it's really important to the two of us that we taught people how to find, fund, and run multifamily properties. We teach people literally soup to nuts, small properties, medium size, and large multifamily properties. It originated about 2.5 years ago. We created Apartment Addicts, and we have a few different programs within Apartment Addicts for people who are just getting started, to people who are more experienced, and people who are very experienced. We have a mastermind group as well. So there are options for anyone at no matter what point of the journey they are at. With respect to our summit, we have an upcoming summit in September. It'll show you a snapshot of what we do with Apartment Addicts. You'll get access to the coaches. Jay, Scott, and I will be there. We are also doing an apartment tour. So we're going to physically be on site at a couple of our properties, walking the properties, talking through what we do. So there's on-site learning as well. So this is going to be an event that you absolutely do not want to miss. You will learn a tremendous amount. We're going to cover a lot of content at the event, at the hotel in terms of training session, but then there will also be the practical aspect of it too. And then we have a lot of our current students attending as well. So in case you want to kind of network with people who are already going through the program, and just asking them what do they find for their value, I think they will tell you hands down that networking aspect is just unbelievable. So we're really, really proud of the community that we're creating. And it's helped a lot of people not only purchase properties, but one of the things we never actually focused on is something you talked about earlier, which is how to leave your W-2. We've had so many people leave their W-2 while in the program that it was like shocking to us. So we have a private chat channel for the different programs. And one person one day just mentioned, Friday's my last day at my W-2. And all of a sudden, like 10 people jumped on and were like, I just left my W-2. I just left my W-2. And I was like, this is absolutely amazing. It is something that, like, you know, obviously it's a part of the journey, but it was never something we set out as a metric for people to achieve. We set out, to help them buy apartments. And this has kind of been like a residual positive effect of being able to take control of your financial freedom. So that's something that you can talk to these folks at the conference and learn from them directly, and just network with people. Because truth be told, even though my first apartment partnership was off of a relationship that I had that was pre-existing, I later joined a coaching program. And at that coaching program, I networked with a group of people that I still partner with today. And I've said it on countless occasions that without any hesitation, that coaching program has grown my net worth by over $2 million alone, just by being able to network with these people and be able to partner in opportunities that they have brought to us. So in fact, the Kansas City deal, that was with a partner that I met in that coaching program, and we've actually done 5 deals together. So this is something that, coaching programs, it's one of the things that a lot of people, say, oh, you can partner with people in the group, but, it's not really like kind of clearly defined. But I can tell you that the networking aspect of coaching programs is probably one of the biggest benefits that you can't normally like put a value on, but has such huge impact on your life.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The power of the networks that you create through coaching programs and masterminds and networking events is huge. You talked earlier about good people know good people. Well, how do you get to know good people? You go to events like this. And so, in what city will this be held?
So this will be at the end of September in Houston, Texas. You can find out more information at apartmentaddicts.com/summit. And that will detail everything that we're doing, the pricing. I'm not sure when this is airing, but the early bird special, it ends at the end of June. And you can also get 10% off by using BADASH10 at checkout in the coupon code.
Perfect. I'll put all that info in the show notes. That's a generous offer that you gave for 10% off. And if people, Ashley, want to connect with you or Bar Down Investments, where would you like to send people?
You can follow me on Instagram at Badash Investor. So that's BADASH Investor. And from there, you can link from the different sites to the different
Perfect.
sites.
Ashley, I want to thank you for your generosity today, generosity of time, and sharing your expertise. And I love to hear all the things that you've got going on. And I sincerely appreciate you sharing your time with me today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.